Yeah.
Either one.
You didn't have to leave me any money. Thank you for having me. Good to be here. A very successful businessman had a meeting with his new son-in-law, and he said, I really love my daughter, and now I welcome you to the family. I've made you a 50-50 partner in my business. All you have to do is go to the factory floor, and you have to learn the operations. And the son interrupted, I hate factories. I can't stand the noise. I see, replied the father-in-law. Well, then we'll work in the office and take charge of some of the operations. Why don't we have you do that? I really hate office work, the son-in-law said. I can't stand being stuck behind a desk all day. Wait a minute, said the father-in-law. I just made you half owner in this money-making organization, but you don't like factories and won't work in an office. What am I going to do with you? Easy, the young man said. Buy me out. Here's what we want to avoid. But where are we going? I want to talk about families in the context of family business. Their impact on the economy specifically, their performance, and their performance specifically in relation to non-family businesses. How long do they last? Sort of a paradigm shift that we're seeing among family businesses. And then some of the results from my dissertation work, which involved surveying 3,000 businesses around their family business, around their succession practices, and then any questions that you have. Family businesses represent a significant percentage of business and job growth in this country. There's approximately 24 million family-owned businesses. They generate 64% of gross national product, employ about 82 million people, or 62% of the workforce. And the U.S. Represent about 60% of businesses out there. In the undeveloped world, it's closer to 80 to about 98% of family business. They also represent between 60 and 70% of all job growth in this country over the past 20 years. And there was sort of a turnoff switch. It was after the recession of the early 90s where you really started to see that it was the family business and that job growth that really drove the economy and the recovery. And interestingly, it is the large companies that often are not family businesses that you see in the paper adding 500 jobs here, 1,000 here, 5,000 jobs here. But the job growth, the real job growth, has come as a result of family businesses. They outperform non-family businesses. Number of studies have shown this. Return on assets in family businesses 6.65% greater than return on non-family businesses. Similar results for return on equity. A good book on this is Managing for the Long Run by LeBron and Miller. They analyze returns of family-controlled versus non-family controlled companies in the S&P 500. And if you don't know this, the S&P 500, about a third of the companies there are family-owned, majority-owned, family-controlled. So if you take nothing else away from today, family business ownership or control is a great stock spread for your portfolio. Family businesses have transcended government and tax regimes. Worldwide, many are centuries old. The oldest family-owned business in the United States, Zildjian Cymbal Company. It's a business in Norwood, Massachusetts. It was actually founded in 1623 in Constantinople and moved to the business in the United States in the early 1900s. And they make a lot of the symbols and stuff you see at high bands. The Beatles use their symbols and stuff like that. They're very proud of that. The oldest business the oldest one in North Carolina is the John Whitney Farm. You don't know that. Founded in 1742. It's also ranked the 14th oldest business in the United States. Worldwide, these businesses get a lot older. The oldest in the world, Congo Gumi. You've heard of Congo Gumi, Japanese company, established 578 AD. And it's a construction company, so if there's any inspiration for people in the construction company, it ought to be Congo Gumi. And what their legacy is that they built a lot of the temples in Japan. And then, guess what had to happen to the temples? Well, you got to maintain them. And about every 200 to 300 years, you basically have to rebuild. So that business worked very well. But also, Congo Gumi is an example of entrepreneurial spirit. During World War II, all funding for temples was cut off in Japan. And so what were they to do? Well, they built a lot of the coffins that returned soldiers came back into Japan in World War II. So this shift, which I'm going to get into a little bit, this entrepreneurial shift is something very special and unique to family businesses. So these businesses provide us an example, and other ones. Business from 705, 717, 723. We have a slew of businesses that are over 1,000 years old. Many in Europe that are hundreds and hundreds of years old. If businesses have the resilience to last for longer periods, despite changing tax law and political structures, then they should be studied to help understand these characteristics that contribute to their longevity. And after all, their impact on the economy is huge. It's immeasurable. So what do we know about the success rate of family business transitions? Well, the most cited far and away in the research is John Ward statement, and it's quoted and it's misquoted. John Ward, University of Chicago professor and consultant, and in the early 80s he studied manufacturing firms in Illinois. And out of that, he concluded only 30% of businesses survived the second generation, 13% into the third, 4% beyond this generation, and again, based on 1982, based on manufacturing firms in Illinois. However, this has become the most widely used data to show that family businesses don't survive. And yet it measured such really a narrow scope of types of businesses in a small area. So were they measuring the right thing? And there's a need to look at family influence and longevity of the family operating together to create and maintain this wealth that they create. Entities will come and go, but their longevity potentially is a poor measure of successful intergenerational wealth transfer. A business exit, keeping this in mind, is not necessarily failure. And think of factors such as harvest, renewal, and diversification, which also have to be considered. Families can be quite entrepreneurial. One study suggested over 90% of business owning families own more than one entity, an average of 3.4. Per generation, what they also found were an average of 2.1 industry shifts per generation. So very entrepreneurial. The reality is that businesses passing successfully between generations is not high enough, but we don't know what it is. The time has come to honor and better understand business owning families as opposed to just the entities themselves. So this previous research had determined that if business was no longer in the family, it's constituted as failure. And by the way, Congo Gumi in 2008, they sold out to a larger company. Imagine that gut-wrenching decision to sell out your family business after over 1,500 years. And what a legacy it was. Congo Gumi's still there, but it's owned by a much larger company. It's not family controlled right now. They intend and they hope to buy it back, but right now it's not. So what does this focus on the family mean? And the single most important factor in financial sustainability Where value is placed on providing for and maintaining wealth for future generations, it's not portfolio size or how well taxes are avoided. We like to focus on those things. It's about managing human capital and addressing human behavior. Traditionally, wealth management firms spend significant resources and time preparing the money for the family, but very little time preparing the family for the money and for the assets. In ancient Rome, property was not thought of as owned by various individuals, but as owned by the family itself. A son was considered critical to the extension of one's legacy. At the patriarch's death, he would sit at the head of the family and carry on the stewardship of communal family assets, take care of family needs. It's a paradox that, counter to the Lone Ranger stereotype of the entrepreneur, it has been empirically shown that when enterprising families function as a team in which autonomy of the individual is suppressed for the greater good of the family, that performance is enhanced, incomes are enhanced, business values are actually enhanced. Baron Braun Allner, in a study, confirmed that the usage of family governance practices, including family constitution, family code of conduct, clear selection and accountability criteria, family council, family reunions, and formal family communication mechanisms enhance financial success of local business and the family. Governance is a necessary component of a well-run business. The lessons learned from the development and operation of the family business should also be transferred to the family to address their strategic and operational needs associated with facilitating family growth. So it starts with clearly articulating a common mission and common values. Now I want to get to the BB&T study. They sponsored my dissertation work in terms of studying these characteristics. I was enthralled by these businesses that last for generations, and yet I was doing consulting work for ones just struggling to make it into the second or third generation of family community, witnessing the family movement. So this became a great passion. Succession is the #1 concern of family business owners. A number of studies have shown that. And many of the first generation family business owners who are part of the baby boom generation reached age 65 in 2011 and are considering retirement. And this is particularly fueling a large interest in the succession issue, I think, right now. The majority of small family business leaders express a desire to retain family control past their tenure, and if not the entity themselves, they certainly desire the next generation to be involved in managing family wealth intergenerationally. So, addressing the current paradigm shift, this business succession study is the first time I'm really talking about the results. I anticipate coming out with a few white papers by the end of the year. The 25-minute survey was sent out to business owners really in the Midwest, Illinois, Missouri, Kansas. About 6% of 3,000 responded. Their businesses worth between 1 and 100 million. And some of the things I wanted to understand better were their culture, their experience, their power structure, the leadership qualities and styles most closely associated with business succession success, preparedness, the impact of long CEO tenure. And by the way, studies have shown that mid-family businesses, that the CEO tenure is 3 times greater than non-family businesses, so it's pretty significant. The difference in succession practices between first, second, and third generation, and they're significant. And there's a development that happens, and there's really, when you get to third or fourth generation, there's an experience factor that kicks in, because they know how to do it and what to look for. Spousal influence, which was also found in the study to be very significant, whether the spouse was in the business or not. And the extent of influence of other family members on the succession. One of the factors that was interesting was the study of the desire to keep the business entity in the family versus this idea of keeping the wealth in the family. And it might be a different business entity. It might be portfolio stock and bonds. It might be real estate. It might be something different than where the wealth was originally generated. But what was the interest in keeping family involved intergenerationally, managing the family wealth? And what was found is it was significant. And what we found was often there was a lot of uncertainty. They were given a wide range of choices around what to do with the business entity. And the most marked choice there was unsure. The average age of respondents was 60. Respondents were as late as early 80s. I had an 82-year-old, unsure. But one thing that was a consistent theme in the majority of the cases was they expressed a strong desire to have family continue to manage wealth intergenerationally. Despite this unsurety, exactly what to do with this business entity at this time. Looked at the impact of corporate performance on succession planning preparedness and found a significance in the corporate performance and the extent that they had prepared for a succession event. The impact of formalizing activities, and really what came out of that was they were presented with a full series of potential responses around how they formalize their business. It might be that they create a mission statement, that they have an employee manual, that they have career paths, that they utilize a board, these kinds of things that are formalizing practices within a business. Those were found to be significantly linked with the extent of their business succession preparedness. And I actually divided them up, and they fell. There were 14 specific items that came out in the statistical analysis among strategic planning, employee motivation, and the board. The board ended up coming out as a very significant impactor of succession preparedness. And the impact of access to capital and how they get capital, whether it's internally, whether it's from the family, whether it's from banking, and financial institutions, and the impact on economic turbulence. So what's going on in the economy, how's that affecting your succession plan? So all these things sort of came together and helped understand a little bit more about what's really happening in terms of these families that are running these businesses. It was found that economic turbulence had a significant impact on the business succession preparedness. So if you look back just recently to the economic turbulence that we had, what happened to a lot of businesses is succession sort of went on the back burner. Survival became more important, and so it's not surprising. In conclusion, what I want to remember is what a huge part of the economy that family businesses represent. And I want to draw a parallel. Anybody here been to Death Valley? Been out in California? One of the harshest places on earth, surface temperatures during the summer. Not a good summer place, not a big, to visit, right? It can be 200 degrees, so a little uncomfortable. And they can go years with no rain in Death Valley. But in the spring of the winter of 2005, they actually had this spurt of rain. They had 6 inches of rain. That doesn't seem like a lot for around here. That was last weekend, right? But for there it was pretty significant. On average, they get less than 2. But in this very condensed period of time, they got over 6 inches. And so what happened was this event that brought clusters of purple, pink, golden, and white wildflowers throughout this valley for the first time in about 50 years. It's about a 50-year event. And so if you look out over, you see pictures of it, you look out over Death Valley, and you see all this color, this vibrancy. And what hits you is that Death Valley, one of the most desolate places on earth, isn't dead, but it's dormant. And similarly, our economy will never be dead, but may have extended periods of dormancy, as we've recently witnessed. But when our economy is dormant, there's no single action to bring back vibrancy and color to our economy greater than the policies and incentives friendly to family businesses, with a focus not just on the entity, but specifically on the family. as I've studied these issues, I think one of the things that's happened as a result is just trying to internalize it and thinking about what does this really mean. And inevitably, it means, I think, some focus. There's all kinds of things going on, stimulus and economic things. And you think about the impact, the sheer impact of family business on the economy, the driver of jobs, of economic growth, of GNP, and you realize just how significant the support and the shoring up of this institution would be. So that was what I intended to study this. The reason I intended to study this passion around seeing these entities be successful. And successful, realizing their deepest desires about what happens to their business, what empowers them, and basically doing our part to understand and strengthen family businesses at the core of their success is our economy. Thank you. Any questions?
Would you mind doing the statistics you did at the beginning and what percentage
Board statistics?
family owned? You had a nice little list at the beginning.
Ward had determined that 30%, and he studied manufacturing firms in Illinois. He determined 30% make it to the second, 13 to the third, and 4% beyond. And that was manufacturing firms in Illinois. He did his survey in 18. Yep.
A couple of observations that might lead to some further discussion. I was fortunate enough to have a small family business for about close to 30 years. I realize that when we're talking about family businesses as well as small businesses, it's a wide spectrum as to how many are involved. In our situation, we were doing fine. My son and I had a great relationship. We defined our business responsibilities. Everything was great until the big guys moved in and surrounded us. And it was probably one of the worst days of my life when my son had to come to his dad and say, "Dad, there's no way both of us can survive. I've got another job." So that was kind of crushing. But I think it was a testimony to the relationship that we had. And so that was a good thing. Right next door to us was the classic case, I think, of what relationships when they're bad, how it can destroy family business. It was a children's clothing store. The founder of the store was an old guy, one of the last Jews to go out of Berlin in 1939, with nothing but his wife in a suitcase. Came to the States, built up a business by sweat, blood, tears, and really had this thing rocking. Along came two kids. One son decided he wanted to be a psychiatrist. He stayed in New York. The other son came with Dad after he got his college education. And the kid was driven nuts because the old man wanted to do business the way he had done it for 30 years. And the kid says, "Dad, there's so much more to do." And because the two of them could not work it out, the business, which was a very profitable business, went down the tubes. Well, I guess my observation is, along with all of the other factors, the relationship factor is pretty darn important.
It is important. And to your point, one of the issues out there that's big is this tension between first and second generation in terms of the roles. The roles are very different. Coming into a business is a different skill set than having been the rainmaker and created something from scratch. And so one of those tensions is that the first generation tends to be rainmakers. They tend to create this structure. Second generation comes in and finds the crevices. This isn't right, or this, why haven't you formalized this? Why don't we have this, Dad? What's going on? But realizing that that is a very natural order of things, that is the role. The second generation's greatest strength, and particularly the third generation, second and third, is that they put structure around this rainmaking and success that has happened. And that's what they're notorious for. Yeah.
I have two questions. One is, I grew up in the Midwest on a farm, so I'd be curious to what your thoughts would be on how statistics would be varied or altered by looking at small farming communities, or because farms often get passed down from generation to generation, if those statistics would be skewed. Also, the second part, the second question is, did you say that you're about to publish this information? And if so, how would we get information on that? Because I was writing down a bunch of people I think would be interested in hearing this.
My target is to have 2 white papers out by the end of the year on it, and that's what I'm shooting for.
Okay. Farming.
But farming, particularly when you look at Europe and you look at the ages of businesses there, about a third to half of long-term businesses, 3, 4, 5, 600 years, involve agriculture in their lands. The other big one there you get into is real estate. You get into hotels and so forth that have been in families for hundreds of years. But farming probably is a little bit unique in that the successful intergenerational transfer, I would guess, would be a little bit higher than your typical business. Sometimes, you know, I have some clients that have family interests in farms that they're not even in the state. And so it tends to stay in a family, and there's somebody who continues to work the farm. There's great pride in family farms. So I don't know that there'd be a huge dramatic difference, but they tend to, in terms of overall, but they do tend to have more longevity. And we see that just when you look at what's the allocation of types of businesses around the world that have lasted all this time.
What? You mentioned one company in North Carolina, 1742.
John Whitley Farm? Yeah.
Who is it?
John Whitley Farm?
Farm.
Yeah.
They make farm equipment. Or?
No, they farm. They're agricultural. Yeah.
John Wilson.
So one of the most spectacular failures of family business into family dynamics that you can recall or know about, I think of the draft, some of this family that own packaging or something like that has spectacular split.
Yeah. Probably the biggest one nationwide that I can think of my head. I'm thinking of like Anheuser-Busch. What happened to Anheuser-Busch? They're owned by Belgians. That is an American company. It's a tragedy, but they're the inner workings. And there's a book. I'm trying to remember the book on this story because it's a very interesting story that goes through the family dynamics that led to ultimately the sale.
One of the things that concerns me that hundreds of our family-owned newspapers have been sold to chains. In your research, come across any data perfecting that?
The question is, what happens when family businesses are sold out to chains?
Newspapers.
Newspapers particularly. Newspaper, I think that's a pretty unique industry in of itself, a segment, just because of all the changes and the fact that news became something that we could get online for free, and now they're backing in trying to figure out how to charge us online for the news that now we've gotten for all this time for free, and it's not working very well. So that's a very unique case in and of itself in terms of newspapers. In a larger sense, these chains, if you broaden it, not just think of newspaper, what's happening is there's a lot of family businesses who are becoming chains, who are becoming larger and recognizing that putting formality around their business, systematizing it, utilizing analytics, that they become, in essence, the purchasers. They become the chains. Anything else? Thank you very much.